Welcome back to Pints and Punditry here on Total FIFA Career Mode. This is a new segment we're going to do every week called Touchline Tuesday. We're going to recap the match week that just ended, and we can't do it until Tuesday because so many of these leagues, the Premier League included, have a great game on Monday afternoon here in the States, evening over in Europe, and we want to make sure we include that. So many channels do a recap on Monday. You gotta rush to get it out. We're gonna wait until the whole weekend's done and get the whole thing in. So we're gonna recap this every week. For this week, it's mostly Premier League focused because not all the leagues have started, so the Premier League had most of the action. We're gonna touch on La Liga too. There was plenty to talk about there, and we're gonna do this every week, debuting on Tuesday mornings or at least by midday, and we're gonna talk about the week that just happened. You can see all the games and all the topics we're going to talk about here over on the side. Go ahead and fast forward to any of them if you want to see about that game or just watch the whole thing through. But before you do, make sure you hit that subscribe button for me. Hit the like button on this video while you're down there. Follow us on Twitter at TotalFIFACM, where I've talked about a lot of these topics, but I expand on them here. And of course, get in those comments. Let me know what you think. Are you happy about your team's performance? Am I off my rocker? Did I miss something? Is there a game I should have been talking about? Absolutely fill up my comment section. I want to hear it. The first game I want to talk about is Brighton Hove Albion, and they took on Luton Town, and the 4-1 score felt a little misleading. They had this game in hand the whole time, but it wasn't the dominant performance that, one, you'd expect out of Brighton, or two, that the scoreline would suggest. It was 2-1 until the late part of the action when the subs really took over. And that's a few of what I want to talk about here. It was a good game, and Brighton is still very good, and they're obviously better than Luton Town, but I wanted to see them dominate a little more, and I didn't see that. Now, João Pedro was their big signing. He's the club record signing transfer fee, and he is so talented, and I don't want this to come off as a knock on him whatsoever because he's only 21. He is a young player. He's going to develop, and he will probably be the next big player that Brighton sells off in a couple years for some massive transfer fee like they've done with McAllister and Caicedo and Cucurella and so many others. But he's not quite there yet in terms of being able to carry this team. Now, again, he is so talented, but he is raw. He's got pace, he's got flash, he's got skill. He doesn't quite have the technical ability yet. And I say yet because he's going to. I think he's a phenomenal player, and I think he's going to be fantastic for Brighton. But if they are relying on him to carry the offensive load this season, I feel like they may be a piece away. I don't think he's quite there yet. I think he's ready to be an exceptional complementary piece, and you're going to see some flashes of brilliance from him. And we did. We saw his ability to draw a penalty, and he did a nice job of converting a penalty as well. Again, fabulously talented, but I don't think he's ready to be the primary offensive contributor on a top 6 team. And that's what Brighton has been and contends to be, and I don't think he's quite there yet. And I've caught some flack, particularly on Twitter, for suggesting that Brighton needs to get out and spend, and that was before they had $100 million in their pocket for Moises Caicedo. They definitely need one more attacking offensive piece to help João Pedro and accentuate him and let him, take some of the load off of him. It feels like they might be one real big contributor away. He is fantastic, he's fabulous, but against better competition and against better defenders, I can see him struggling to convert. You're going to see some flashes of brilliance. I don't know if you're going to see them always convert into goals, and that's going to be a problem. And because of all the moves Brighton has made, including having to hold off Caicedo because this transfer was pending, their starting lineup on Saturday was a little bit underwhelming. But the subs that came on were a game changer, and I think that's the future for Brighton. The future for Brighton is bright, no pun intended. It's always bright, right? They've always got a stable of young players ready to take on the next wave, and they run such a great business. We saw that in the substitutes that came on, and I think the substitutes are the future. I mean, look at these substitutes that came on. Billy Gilmore, 22, Adnora, 21, Evan Ferguson, 18. And they came on, they scored a couple goals, and the whole game picked up after that. And I think that's where the lifeblood is. It's not going to be on Danny Welbeck. You know, he is what he is, but he's not going to carry them to another European finish. So I think the future, and by the end of this season, I think you'll see De Zerbi playing these subs as starters. I think that's where this season's going to go for them. They're just not there yet. It's early in the season, totally understandable. But I think that's where Brighton is headed, where you're going to see a very young team with all these departures. You're going to see these young guys step up, and by the middle of the season, that's going to be your starting lineup, and they're going to be really exciting. Next thing I want to talk about is Arsenal and Nottingham Forest, and for a few things, the game was very interesting. But before that, when you look at this team sheet, you cannot help but be blown away by the arsenal, pun intended, of young offensive talent that they have amassed that was all starting in this game. This front six was incredible. You had Nketiah flanked by Martinelli and Saka, and then Havertz, Odegaard, and Declan Rice behind them. All 24 or under, all absolute stars in the making. The worst, and I use that term very loosely, of the group might be Nketiah, and he's still an incredibly talented player who's making a name for himself, and he's going to do well while Gabriel Jesus is out. This is just an incredible offensive attacking team. Now, Declan Rice does have a lot on his plate on the defensive end because of the way this team is set to attack. But man, they are going to light some bad teams up. And that's actually what made their performance on Saturday a little bit disappointing. Nottingham Forest, you would think, is a team they can come out and really attack and get out on the front foot and put a few goals in. And they did not dominate this game. And I really left watching this game, I left wondering, is that a commentary on Arsenal, or is that a commentary on Nottingham Forest? And it's probably a little bit of both. Arsenal's obviously very talented. This was not their best game, but they got the job done that they needed to get done, and that's what good teams do. Nottingham Forest is not going to mess around, and they have added enough firepower of their own that they are going to compete, and they have no intention of being stuck in a relegation battle and barely eking out another Premier League stay. I think they're going to be better than that. All you have to do with Nottingham Forest is look at this front three, and honestly, it's a top tier front three in the Premier League. Maybe not in that upper echelon of Man City and Arsenal and Manchester United, but it's better than at least half the league. It's in the top half of the league. You got Morgan Gibbs-White, Brennan Johnson, and Danilo. Again, all young players and all really good attacking front foot players. Now, the whole roster is not quite as deep as the teams are going to go up against, and that's a financial thing. But that front three, whether they're playing in a traditional 4-3-3 or some sort of 4-3-2-1, or however they're going to set this up, but there's a lot of ways they can line up because those guys are versatile. Morgan Gibbs-White can be a winger, he can be a second striker, he can be a midfielder. You've got a lot of talent there, and you've got a lot of versatility, so they can line up a lot of different ways, and they're going to surprise some people because at the end of the day, they can put the ball in the net, and that's something that a lot of teams cannot do. So for Nottingham Forest, you hate to try and chalk things up to moral victories. Obviously, they would have liked to get some points. But to be honest, they should feel almost as good about this game as Arsenal does, maybe even better. Arsenal, might look at this as a disappointing win, whereas Nottingham Forest is going to look at this as a very positive loss. So it's all about perspective. But while Arsenal is happy to come away with the points, Nottingham Forest is they've got to be really happy about how they played in this game. Next up, we've got Newcastle and Aston Villa, and boy, was this Newcastle announcing that they are for real. Oh, you guys are serious about this, huh? This was not some fluke that they finished in the top four last year. They are here to stay, and they announced their presence with authority. Aston Villa is a good team. They are on the up and up. With Unai Emery, he's got a good squad going. He's running a good club. They are technically proficient. They're well organized, and they're coming off a great year. It's a really unfortunate way for them to start the season, having to go to St. James Park and take on a Newcastle team that is flush with reinforcements. But this Newcastle team is for real, and this was a real changing of the guard for them, and you could see it right from the starting lineup. Alexander Isak, Anthony Gordon, and Sandro Tonali instead of Wilson, Longstaff, and Murphy. That is a game changer right there, and that's what this club was missing. This club was missing depth, right? When you can take Wilson, Longstaff, and Murphy, and now you're bringing them off the bench like they did, and you're rotating them in for Carabao Cup games, and when you're playing Luton Town and some of these other smaller clubs, and you're rotating in that second team, you're building an entire second team. By the way, a second team of guys that helped you to a top 4 finish last year, which we all admit may have been an overachievement, but they are doing damn sure that they are not going to let it seem that way. So this was a real changing of the guard, and you saw Isaac take control. He's going to be an absolute star in this league. Tonali announced his presence with authority as well, and this is really a coming out party for Newcastle, because it's one thing to have a good finish in a good year. It's another thing to back it up. And yes, they've got tons of money, but they're not out there spending it super recklessly. They are reinforcing in good spots. They're investing in good young talent. They've been doing this right, and it is a scary thought to be well run and have a ton of money. That's what Manchester City has. That's what nobody else has, right? Chelsea has a ton of money. They're not well run. Brighton's well run. They don't have a ton of money. Only one club is really both. Arsenal's coming up on that as well. Liverpool has had their day, but Newcastle has announced that they are a part of that club. Well-funded, tons of money, well-run, makes good decisions. That's a frightening thought. Newcastle is here to play. Next, I want to jump over to Spain. La Liga on Saturday. Real Madrid played, and they've got a whole new look, and they took on an admirable and a formidable club in Athletic Club Bilbao, and they really have a whole different look to them, and I'm fascinated on how this is going to play out, and I am reserving judgment, but I have some very specific questions, and I think I'm going to do a video breaking down their tactics in a couple weeks once they've played at least 2, maybe 3 games, and we can see how they're going to roll this out, because I'm not sure they're going to look the same every game in terms of their formation and their tactics. But what they rolled out was, I guess, a 4-4-2, but that midfield 4 was in a diamond. So you had Vinicius Jr. and Rodrigo up front as 2 strikers, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. Then you had that midfield diamond with Jude Bellingham in an advanced position. But that makes only 3 attacking players, and part of the draw of Jude Bellingham is his ability to play box to box. So you really only have 2 out-and-out attackers, because you want Bellingham and his defensive abilities involved in your defensive side. And so you only have 2 guys that are really out-and-out attackers. And what stands out to me is that these are 2 wings. This was your left wing and your right wing, and you had Karim Benzema in the middle. He's gone, and they haven't adequately replaced him. And they're going to be fine, right? They're going to be fine in La Liga. The only club that's really going to challenge them is Barcelona. They're going to get a top 4 finish just on talent alone. But they are not built the way they used to be, which was when they played against better teams, they were a counter-attacking nightmare. And you saw this in the Champions League in previous years against Manchester City and other teams that dominated possession. They would let them have possession and then counter-attack with this elite pace. Vinicius Jr. and Rodrigo out on the wings. Benzema would sit there and poach and do his thing, and it was dynamic. They're missing that part in the middle, and so what they're doing, they've got options, right? They've got 2 options. They've got 2 guys playing up front in this wing striker hybrid, so you've got a choice. Bring them in the central mode and put them in the middle of the pitch, and they lose the dynamism of that speed, right? That pace works better out on the wing. Or you let them stay wide and use that pace, and then you're missing somebody in the middle. And that's where Bellingham has to get forward, and he's capable. He's more than capable. He's a fantastic player, and he's creative, especially for his size. He's a great passer. He can finish pretty good for a midfielder. But when you're that involved in the defense and you're dropping back the way he's capable of and the way I'm sure they want him to, it's tough to get forward. Oh, to be 20 years old again. He is going to put some miles on his legs trying to be both. So I'm interested to see how this plays out. It wasn't an issue this weekend, but I'm really fascinated to see what this is going to look like essentially without a striker, because you got 2 choices. Either keep your wings out on the wings and play without a striker and hope your midfielders can fill in, or bring them in and sort of cut off their speed and let it play less, which is their best capability. So we are definitely going to do a deeper dive into this at some point, so make sure you subscribe to this channel and check out that video when it comes in a couple weeks. I want to see a few more games before we dive into it, but that was my takeaway. Was I'm not sure what this is going to look like. They're going to be fine in La Liga with Town alone, but what happens when they face the better, more high caliber clubs in the Champions League, or when they have to face Barcelona in a Clásico, and what happens when they have to counterattack and all of a sudden some of that counterattacking ability is not there anymore. So that's something I'm watching for. Jury's still out. I don't have an opinion formulated yet, but I'm watching a few things because I'm really fascinated to see how it turns out. And then on Sunday, we get to Chelsea-Liverpool, and this was probably the game of the week in the Premier League, probably across Europe, in terms of two top-tier teams, clubs, facing one another. This was the most premier matchup. The main takeaway for this is that both of these clubs are going to be very good this year, right? I don't know which one's going to be better. Hell, they played to a draw, so maybe they don't know who's going to be better yet. But both of these clubs are going to be very good. That is for sure. And that should be a given with the talent they have, but last year it wasn't. Chelsea finished mid-table. Liverpool had to fight their way up towards the end to have a respectable finish. So these were two underachieving clubs. I don't think they're going to underachieve this year. They may not contend for the title. I don't know that they are where Man City and Arsenal are, and maybe Manchester United is, but they are going to compete. They're going to be exciting to watch, and there's a lot of good things happening. Now, at this point, we have no idea what Chelsea's finished product is going to look. They added two defensive midfielders after the game in Caicedo and Lavia, so their roster is constantly in flux, and only closing a transfer window can stop that. Liverpool needs to make some moves, and losing out on those two guys is going to prove to be huge. How has the soccer world not talked more about the fact that Liverpool has no defensive midfielders? When did this happen? I feel like this was a massive oversight. Maybe I just missed it, but this has not been a common theme this offseason. Yes, they obviously had the departures that they had. I guess it never dawned on me that they never replaced them in any way. I was stunned to see this team sheet come out, and McAllister, who they paid all this money for, is basically playing in the six. And it's not that he's not capable of it, he is, but his best qualities are his creativity on the attack, his passing, his ability in space. He is best in a attacking midfield role, as we saw for Argentina, as we saw for Brighton. He can go box to box if you want to put him in a central role. He can even play in that defensive midfield role, but it's best when you've got a double pivot with a more defensive-minded player. Had they been able to pair him with Caicedo, who is great at going to get the ball, that would have worked beautifully. But McAllister has to have that ability to get forward, and they basically rolled out 5 forwards and then McAllister, an attacking midfielder, in a defensive midfield role in a wildly attacking front six. And it dawned on me after I saw that roster, oh, they don't have any defensive midfielders, which is why they're in the market for all of them, and they just missed out on 2 of the best ones, but there are plenty more out there. But they've got to do something there, because this was incredibly, aggressive attacking. They got away with it with Chelsea because Chelsea did not appear to be very disciplined yet. They're still learning that Mauricio Pochettino system. But better teams are going to exploit that. Better offensive teams are going to exploit that. And that's going to be a problem for Liverpool. So this was a great game. This was fun to watch. Ends up being in a draw. You had a few goals taken off the board. But both of these teams are going to be just fine. They're going to be exciting. They're going to be in contention for those top 4 spots. And that's a good thing for the league. So at the very least, this was very entertaining. But we're still seeing both of these teams filling a few holes. What are your thoughts? I would love to get your comments below. Make sure you're subscribing to the channel if you don't already. Hit the like button for me while you're down there, and definitely follow us on Twitter at TotalFIFACM, where you can leave lots of comments as well. Thanks as always for joining us here on Touchline Tuesday. This is Total FIFA Career Mode.